Hey, Jimbo, you ready for this deal?
Fire in the hole.
Old stories like long lost friends, rodeos and late night bends, history before our time, round pens and pasture rides, cowboys of the Osage.
Howdy, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Cowboys of the Osage podcast, brought to you by the Ben Johnson Cowboy Museum, located in historic downtown Pusk, Oklahoma. Hey, it's old Cody over here, and as always, I got my main man with me, Mr. Rodeo historian himself, Jimbo Snively. Hey, morning, Jimbo. Where the heck are we? Who are we talking to?
Hey, Cody boy, it's just another great day in Osage, but we're not in Osage. Cody, we're in Coffeyville, Kansas, at the rodeo grounds. Rodeo's later tonight, and we're talking to Justin McKee, and I think Justin, arguably the most recognizable face in the Western world today, probably.
And voice,
of course. He's been a steer roper and a voice of the PBR, the rodeo announcer, a pastor, and now he's pretty much the voice of the Cowboy Channel. I mean, you just see him all the time, and we're just really tickled to get to finally sit down and visit with him. It's been a long time coming. And Justin, welcome to the Cowboys of the Osage podcast.
Well, Jimbo, I'm so excited to be here. I'm just a huge fan of what you and Cody have done. I have never missed an episode. I am on pins and needles waiting on the next one to come out. And I have been dreaming for this chance to visit with you guys for a long time. You don't have a bigger fan than me, I guarantee you.
Cool. I'm glad we got one.
He's called me leaving the Northwest before and said, I've done binge listened to about 10 of these things on the way up here, and I'm going to listen to about 10 of them more on the way home.
Well, now you guys have got so many of them that I'm starting to re-listen to the ones from way back. And, I've always been upset at myself because I don't have a great memory. But, when it comes to listening to old podcasts, again, it comes in handy because I already forgot what I heard before. So,
Hey, I was going to ask you, before all the internet came along and stuff, how did you announcers do your homework on all these cowboys? I mean,
yeah, that's a good question.
That seems like it was a lot of studying on your part.
Oh man, we had to keep our own notes. Today we got the PRCA website, and we go to Facebook. I look up a lot of people just on Facebook to kind of see what their horse's name is, or where they're from and what their interests are. And it almost feels like cheating after growing up in the old school because it's so easy. I mean, it still takes. And here's what a lot of people don't realize: when I have a 2.5-hour rodeo performance, and all announcers are this way at the pro level. I mean, I'll put in 2 hours to every 1 hour that I'm announcing, minimum, and sometimes 3 to 1 in preparation, still today.
And that crazy, I'm like on how Kurt Robinson, he kept all those stats and stuff.
I mean,
Kurt. Holy moly, like you guys, pre-internet, I don't know how the heck these guys did it. They were true fans of the sport too.
Well, when I was young announced, I did a lot of the rodeos when I was first in the PRC. I did them on horseback. And so I just announcing horseback when I'm looking somebody in the eye and I'm having a conversation with different people in the stands just allowed me to be more conversational, number one, and to just have more things to say. I'm just talking to these people instead of being alienated maybe up in that announcer stand further away, and you're trying. It changed the game for me when we didn't have all those assets.
Where'd you grow up at, Justin?
Right here in Coffeyville, Edna to be exact, right. 13 miles east, right on the Kansas-Oklahoma line. And my dad actually owned the sale barn here in South Coffeyville from the time I was in kindergarten clear through high school when he sold it to Jim Folk. And when I was a freshman in high school, he actually bought the sale barn in Parsons, Kansas, so he had 2 of them for a while. And my dad bought cattle all over the country and all over the West, really. And we had a preconditioned yard right over here at Edna, south of Edna, where my folks still live. And so it's good to come up here to the Coffeyville Rodeo where I actually got my start and see all my friends and neighbors. This is reunion week for me to get to come back here to Coffeyville.
What was your job at the sale barn growing up, Justin?
Every one of them. I did them all. I wasn't too handy in the office, but I sorted cattle. I was in charge of the sorting crew when I was in 7th grade. I mean, I was sorting most everything at South Coffeyville, and I just my dad, he run a tight ship, and I mean, if I didn't have cattle ready, man, it was bad news. I had to keep pace. One of my favorite sayings, and I chuckle about this all the time. My dad told me at a very young age, he says, whatever you do, don't ever let me catch you standing still. You be moving. Even if it's wrong, be moving. You keep them cattle coming.
Hey, I kind of grew up in a sale barn too, Jimbo. These cattle sales, when they would want to add a horse sale to their whole repertoire, they would hire a guy like my dad to come in that knew the horse business and the horse market, and they'd partner with the horse sale on him. So we'd get there early in the day, sometimes the day before, and I'd have to tag in all the horses. And then it'd get closer to the sale, and the tack sale would start, and I'd have to hold up all the tack as they sold it and pass it out to the people. And then if there's any bronc ponies, I had to ride them through the ring. And then all the rest of the time, I was back there in the alleys.
Yep.
Pin B3, and I have to run down there, and because everyone else wasn't smart enough to not stand behind the gate. I'm the only guy that survived them back alleys right there, Justin.
Got to stand behind the gate, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Did you want to be a roper or announcer when you were growing up?
I want to be a bull rider.
Really?
That's what a lot of people don't know. Matter of fact, it all goes back, most everything goes back to Coffeyville, to this rodeo, because my folks were not rodeo people, but they were horse people, and, grew up pioneer roots on both families, and I'm double-bred cow trader and all that, but nobody rodeoed really. And so, but we came to the Coffeyville Rodeo, and I was just bug-eyed from the get-go. I mean, when I was 4, I wanted to get on a bull. I would have gotten on any bull Harry Vold had here when I was 4 years old and wouldn't have thought twice about it. I mean, I begged my parents to find a place for me to get on a bull at 4. And so my dad, being a cattle buyer, one day he ran across a dwarf bull with horns and a hump. I mean, he was perfect. And we named him Funny Face. There was a popular song back in the mid-'70s, Funny Face, and he had a brockle face, and he could look funny. So his name was Funny Face, and my uncle and my dad, we pinned him behind the gate, and I got on my first bull when I was 4, and that's really all I wanted to do. And there just wasn't very many opportunities, for kids. By the way, I'm so proud of my parents to let me go be a boy. I want that to be a message out there to parents that feel like they got to protect their kids. I'm so thankful that I got to do all the rough stuff and all the rough stock, and I was so glad that they let me play football and wrestle and let boys be boys. But as I grew up, team roping became really popular in the late 70s. It started to kind of get a foothold around here and into the 80s. And about 1980, my dad built an arena because I just wanted to rope really bad. And the guy that worked for my dad, Phil and Donna Allen, been with my dad for as long as I've been around. And he liked to rope a little bit. And there were several neighbors, and everybody's got practice arenas now, but nobody had one. But my dad built one when I was 10 or 12. And every Sunday afternoon, all the neighbors would come over and we'd rope. So I wanted to do both, and I was an auctioneer at the barn. That was the other thing that I wanted to do, is I wanted to be an auctioneer. I was as taken by the auctioneers as I was bull riding at the time, and I was fortunate enough to have, before my dad bought South Coffeyville, he was actually working at Coffeyville and Chinook. So when I was 3 years old, I'd follow him up there, and he worked in the box, and he was actually the weighmaster there early on. And somehow I figured out how to turn that microphone on, and I was 3 years old, and I'd get in that box way before the sale started, of course. He was getting all the tickets ready for the scales, and I was just up there with him. And before you knew it, some of them old guys that showed up early at the sale barn, they'd go to bidding and yipping and hollering, and I was just jabbering away, and man, I was hooked. When I heard my voice come over that electronic system, I was hooked. So I knew right then I was going to be involved in rodeo and be behind the microphone as an auctioneer. And so as I would find junior rodeos. Our FFA chapter over here at Altamont, at Labette County, actually put on a junior rodeo every year. That was our fundraiser. So got to compete. That was the biggest deal, is you got to shoot dog and ride steers or cows or whatever they had and do that. And but I got my senior year, I got to announce that junior rodeo. And so I knew then. And then I met Jimmy Crothers, who's ironically the stock contractor here at Coffeyville.
Yeah, that's what Brad was telling me just a minute ago.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I've only known Jimmy my whole life.
I know. Me too. Well, Mike Samples helped Jimmy, and he also helped my dad. And he told Jimmy, he said, I know a kid that can announce that high school rodeo at Erie, Kansas. And so that was another one of my first was at Erie. And then here at Coffeyville, after that, Joe Rinkenbaugh was a friend of the family, and he was the rodeo chairman. Of course, Clem McSpadden was the announcer here at Coffeyville for years. And in about 1990, I started doing some rodeos and some college and amateur rodeos. And I asked Joe, I said, could I do the youth events? Because we had a little junior rodeo association here, and they barrel race and rope calves. There'd be two of them. The two leaders got to rope here. It's pro rodeo. The junior kids got to, and I got to announce him with Clem. But my biggest break in the direction of announcing and full-time rodeo came when I met Bronk Rumford. And Bronk has taught me a lot about announcing. And I was at Kansas State. I was elected state FFA president in 1987. And wasn't really planning on going to K-State, but when I got that, I kind of had to go to Manhattan. Got involved with the rodeo club and was roping a little bit by then. Bull riding went away because my shoulders kept dislocating. And got tired of that and stuck to the team roping and calf roping. And, but at K-State, I was helping with the rodeo, and I got to announce some of the sponsors there. Our rodeo coach, Merle Flynn, let me do some announcing with Howdy White and Bronk Rumford. I knew Bronk a little bit. He probably didn't know me, but I'll never forget. We were feeding cattle at the college rodeo during the day or after the show, and Bronk said, Justin, he said, you really ought to consider this rodeo announcing deal. He said, I've got some jobs right now. He said, I like what I hear. I said, Bronk, I got to go announce some amateur rodeos for a couple of years first. And he said, all right, well, when you do, you let me know. And Sam Howery was in the IPRA. And he got me some jobs announcing IPRA rodeos. And Willie Mendel gave me my first 5 rodeos that paid.
Yeah.
And that was a big lick. And then, of course, I stayed in touch with Clem. Of course, he just lived down the road at Chelsea. And that's kind of the early days, early beginnings.
Now, were you roping steers kind of along the same time?
I wasn't until I met the woman I would marry. And I married into a steer roping family. And her dad was Harry Straw, that had his PRCA card, but he always had a full-time job, so he couldn't travel a lot. But her mom's brother was Shote Webster, arguably one of the greatest steer ropers ever. And as we were dating, Harry Straw, my would-be father-in-law, had an old gray horse that was his old tripping horse, and he was done, but the horse still had a few years left in him. And as we got serious, I could see that this is where it's at, because I've got some high-level people that can help me. And they did. And they showed me how to log a horse and showed me how to tie. And then Neil Whirl has been, Sonny.
We're going to be doing a podcast with Neil real
soon. I can't wait. He's been a long-time family friend, going back to my grandparents and his mom and dad and everything. So I went to Neil for some help. And then here's the crazy thing about my steer roping career is that Guy Allen, a lot of people may have forgotten this, moved to Veneta in the early to mid-'90s, Veneta, Oklahoma. And they were going down to Wade Markham's Cowboy Junction Church. It had just started in the barn. And Jeannie and I started going over there about the same time, so I got to know Guy. And one day I said, Guy, can you help me with my steer roping? And he said, absolutely. And man, he spent 2 hours with me, and I barely knew the guy over there in Veneta in Wade Markham's arena. And that was the game changer. And then I started announcing rodeos in New Mexico, Carlsbad, and Las Cruces, and what was the other one? Roswell. 3 rodeos back to back. And then as Jeannie and I got married, we used to go out there for a month, and we stayed. And by that time, Guy and Creel had moved back to Lovington, New Mexico, so we'd go stay at Guy's for a month. And Bucky Hefner was usually staying with him because they were team roping them. And anyway, I shortcutted the system for steer roping. I had Harry Straw and Shote Webster and Neil Worrell and Guy Allen. But Guy, he really shortcutted the system for me.
I remember Harry Straw when I was a kid when he was roping. I think he worked at Phillips.
He did.
Yep.
He did.
Yeah. A nice guy. I remember that about
the
him.
nicest guy, the best father-in-law ever.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. Brad's over there. Are you filming this whole thing? I was just wanting you to take a picture. Oh, you're wanting to film it. Okay. Brad Maddox, one of my favorite rodeo judges of all time. He was probably one of them first rodeos I announced. That's 30 years ago.
He was big time bareback rider back in the day.
You.
I've seen video of him riding bareback horses.
You did get a picture of me and my favorite celebrities, though, didn't you?
I will get a picture.
Okay. All right.
Hey, you were talking about Bronk a while ago.
Yeah.
There's not too much about the rodeo business he don't know.
Ain't that right?
But what a lot of people may not know, well, his dad was in the rodeo business too.
Yes.
Floyd, what a great guy that guy was. Did you know Floyd very well?
Oh, my goodness. Floyd, I'm getting chill bumps right now thinking about Floyd.
I grew up
Rumford.
with him. I grew up in Hutchinson, Kansas. Floyd ran the horse sale right there at South Hutch. And, he was the PRCA stock contractor in the area. So, I always thought he was such a great guy.
I'm going to talk about Floyd Rumford, but do you remember the first time we met? Because I remember.
That could be my drinking days. I'm not sure.
No, you were only about 16.
Well, don't matter.
Maybe I do. Jog our memory.
So one of my first, when I got my PRCA card, another thing I just fell into was, and Bronk helped me get this, it was with Jerome Robinson. And he had a lot of the rodeos in some buildings. Primarily was
I do.
Wichita.
I'm starting to remember it now. Yeah,
at the Kansas Coliseum.
Yeah, Jerome Robinson. I used to work for him growing up a little bit. Jimbo.
You helped him a little bit, and you were out in the parking lot at the Kansas Coliseum one day. I was announcing that night, and I parked beside you, and you had your dummy out there. You were roping horns with a poly rope, and I stopped everything and put my clipboard up, and I got to rope the dummy with you, and you were 15, 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the first time we met. But anyway.
I remember you had to stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning setting up the arena, and then another 3, 4 o'clock in the morning tearing it down, hauling it right out of there. But I tell you what, I learned a lot about rodeo from guys like Jerome Robinson.
Oh, my
some
goodness,
of them.
yes.
I mean, holy moly. What a wealth of knowledge that Jerome Robinson had just on production of a rodeo, not to mention, being a great contestant himself.
What a master. So, he was the dean of production. And I'm so glad I had it. And, not only did I announce some of his rodeos, but then we worked together in the PBR. But maybe we'll talk about that later. I want to talk about Floyd Rumford because a few people in my life has meant more to me than Floyd Rumford. And he was in his 70s when I came along there. And in 93 is when I got my PRCA card to announce. Filled my permit in steer roping in 96, 95 or 6. But in 93, I went right to work for Rumford's, just like Bronk said I would. And funny story. I got to announce Abbeville as my first PRCA rodeo that I got to announce. I announced here at Coffeyville, but it was just a junior kids before that. But that was my first PRCA rodeo. And then we left Abbeville and we went over to Branson. There was a weekly PRCA rodeo at Branson. It didn't last very long. I think that was the only season. But Bronk had that. And we went over, and I'll never forget this. It was out in the country, and they set this arena up, and I got there the day beforehand, and I hadn't. Of course, I'm announcing horseback and entered in the team rope, and I entered in the team rope, and everywhere I was announcing. So I was over sitting at my horse trailer, and Floyd Rumford pulled up there and said, "Hey, Justin, how you doing?" I said, "Good, Floyd. Good to see you." And he said, "Well, we're glad to have you. We're excited." He said, "But there's just one thing." He said, "I need to tell you." He said, I was wearing a ball cap. He said. Any time that you're working for us, he said, wear your cowboy hat. He said, we want people in town and around here to see all of us in a cowboy hat all the time. We're eating at the cafe. We won't be wearing cowboy hats. That way people are going, oh, the rodeo must be in town. We better go buy a ticket. And he said it just as nice as could be. And I thought, oh, man, he will never see me without a cowboy hat on. and that's been a big deal for me, and that's something I've tried to pass along to young people, still to this day. Is if you're going to be a cowboy, and then the guy that worked for my dad, he was an older gentleman there at the Parsons Sale Barn. He said, if you're going to be in the cattle business, you look like a cattleman. And between him and Floyd Rumford, I said, I'm going to wear a cowboy hat. And to this day, the last 30-some years, there ain't very many people has ever seen me in a ball cap.
I know it's an easy habit to get into if you're a rodeo guy. I feel like putting that ball cap on, going up and down the road, not bending your hat up, but still wanting to keep the sun out of your eyes. But ever since I got off the road, I've wore a cowboy hat every single day of my life. That's the first thing I put on when I leave the house.
Yeah.
They said Shote was the first guy to wear a ball cap, roping jackpots and stuff.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, sure was.
Interesting. But now that you mention it, I saw a lot of pictures of him in a ball cap, even at some of those ropings.
Yeah,
of course,
yeah.
they weren't PRCA sanctioned.
Right. But those big steer roping jackpots, he wore a ball cap a lot.
Yeah, you're right. Interesting.
He was the first one.
Of course, he could do whatever he wanted
Yeah,
to do.
yeah.
He was the king.
Right, sure was.
Were you there at Abbeville when Floyd rode his last bareback
I
horse?
was there. I was right
Tell
there.
us about that real quick, because that thing, it sounds like a lie, Jimbo. In fact, when I was a kid, I thought, this sounds crazy. I was a little kid.
Yeah, he was
there at the rodeo.
75 years old. Every 10 years, so when he was 45, long past his retirement from competing, every 10 years he would get on a bareback horse at Abbeville at the rodeo. I think I'm telling this right. Yeah. Brad is sitting in here. Brad Matty's helped him on.
I helped him on his last one.
On the last one, and he was 75.
Nervous.
Oh, that's a lot of pressure for you, right?
Yeah.
Everybody was nervous, but Floyd.
I was nervous.
Floyd wasn't.
But every year, from 45, he'd get on one, and at 55, he'd get on one. Brad, tell me if I'm wrong on any of this. 65 years old, he got on one, but the last one he got on, he was 75 years old at Abbeville, and he picked his own horse out. And I had Bronk retell this story the other day, and he said he picked one out, and he's like, Dad, no, he didn't pick a hopper. You remember what horse it was?
Not the name of it.
Well, it don't
remember
matter.
the rider.
It don't matter, but he wasn't no cupcake. And old Floyd, he was stiff-legged as all get out, but I mean, he kept him up there. He tried he kept him up there 3 or 4 jumps, and they didn't drop until 3 or 4 jumps, and by golly, he was there. Of course, Bronk was riding right beside him as a pickup man. They had him sandwiched pretty good after the first 4 jumps. 75 years old, and he did her just like that.
Did you ever go to the horse sale that he ran there in Hutchinson?
Regrettably, I never did. No.
Well, you know the sale ring there. They had a big
Sure.
pipe sale ring that was real tall, so cattle couldn't jump out of it. Floyd, he'd walk around the top of the pipe of there.
I saw him walk the top
Yeah.
rail a bunch.
Yeah.
He had an incredible balance. Into his 70s, he
Wow.
was walking the top rail.
You mentioned Harry Vold a while ago. He used to have this rodeo right here where we're at.
He did.
I didn't
A
know.
lot of years, over a couple of decades.
Well, what a historic stock contractor that guy is.
You know, it was really a cool time as a kid in the late 70s and early 80s to show up at Coffeyville. Brad can back me up on this too. And it was a very successful rodeo. This was still a stop for the big boys. And Monty, Hawkeye Henson, and Donnie Gay, and all the legends of that time were in Coffeyville, and Harry Vold was the man. I remember seeing Purple People Eater here.
Oh, yeah, the fighting bull.
That was the fighting bull that sired Crooked Nose, you know. And
Oh, that was
so-
Crooked Nose's dad?
you
Holy
betcha.
moly.
You betcha. And so, yeah, it was such a big deal. And the thing about Harry Vold, he was just like John Wayne. He was so iconic. And then we got to be very dear friends because I announced Cheyenne for years with him. And I got to sit right beside him at his trailer night after night. Well, you were there with us
Yeah.
for a time, Cody.
No, yes,
we
sir.
got to sit right beside him, and he could tell stories and drink some red beer and the amazing. But what I'm trying to get at is, even though I got to be very close to Harry Vold, every time I was around him, it was a big deal. It was like I was with Elvis every time.
I used to like to watch his bareback or his saddle bronc horses buck.
Yeah.
He was sitting there bucking in his saddle or on the back of the chutes just as hard as they were, and his little old spurs were just sitting there jingling. It was really something to see because he loves a bucking horse more than anything.
Well, the love of the game. You know, there's people in that elite level that have the highest respect and love for the game, and Harry Vold was one of them. You know, Hadley Barrett and Clem McSpadden and all the legendary stock contract, Cotton Rosser, you know, It was amazing. I'm so glad I got to be a part of their life.
Yeah, it was such a family business. Heck, his wife was still saddling parade horses, you know.
Wow.
Same age as Harry,
Did
lining
you,
everybody out.
did you pattern yourself after any particular announcer?
Well, that's a really good question. Clem McSpadden was the guy that I looked up to because he was the voice at Veneta. Of course, we went to the Veneta Rodeo to watch, and Claremore and Coffeyville, and I mean he was the man because he was from here, and I wanted to be like Clem. My announcing style not necessarily fit me because somebody gave me the greatest advice early on. I wish I could tell you who, but the key to being a good rodeo announcer is just to be you. Be as much you as you can, and don't try to sound like anybody else or don't try to mimic anybody. And again, it kind of goes back to that horseback announcing in my early days because I was just really trying to just talk to people, just tell them our story. And you know, when you needed to get excited, then if it was an excitement-worthy event, then let's get excited. But don't yell at him the whole time. That was what I learned from Clem. I took another big part of my story involved, Brad, you were probably here too, involved Bob Tallman, but also involved Jimmy Crothers, who's a stock contractor here. He put on a finals at PKD Arena.
Yeah, I mean, Andover, Kansas.
Outside of Wichita.
Yep.
And in the 2 years before I got my card in 91.
That was a big deal at one time.
It was a
that
big
PK
deal. 91 and 92, I would leave. I was in Stillwater going to school at Oklahoma State, and I'd drive up there and announce in bull ridings for Jim Crothers.
It was pre-PBR and all this.
Oh,
This is like right when all
was.
these bull ridings were cracking off.
Exactly.
It's before
Bull
any
riders
big
only.
unified. I don't even. It may have been before bull riders
They had
only.
just come along about that time, and because I'm going to include them in the story. And so not only did Jimmy put them Thursday night bull ridings on that I'd leave college for and go up there and announce on Thursday nights, but he also had this association called the Central Plains Rodeo Association. He had the finals at PKD. Well, after the finals was over, he had to go get bulls over at the Kansas Coliseum again. They're on the north side of Wichita because they had a bull riders only event.
Yes, sir.
And so me and Jeannie, we hadn't gotten married yet, but we jumped in there and we rode up there with them and pick up bulls. And of course, the event was over, but there was an after party, and there was Bob Tallman in the flesh. He was doing TV back in the bull riders only days, and
Now,
there he was.
That bull riders only. Let's just
Yeah.
take just a second and explain to everybody what that association is. But you were talking to Bob Tallman at the after party.
Bull Riders Only was a group very similar to the PBR that came before the PBR. It was the predecessor. I think you could qualify it like that. And Shaw Sullivan was in charge, and a bunch of his buddies that he grew up around Cheyenne and north of Denver and Fort Collins, that they all rode bulls, you know, Dennis Humphreys, and he had a good crew of people, and all the top guys were going to those events, and they were having,
them.
Yep, I mean the very best bull riders, and would have been 91, 92, 93 is when things started. They started thinking about the PBR, and then 94 was the first year they had the PBR finals. And so the BRO came before the PBR, and they had a television deal.
Yeah, they
and
were big time.
Tallman was doing it. He was doing the broadcast with Gary LeFew, and they were packing the big coliseums all over. Nobody had ever done it before. I think they had about 8 or 10 events. But, so he was doing TV, and I got to meet Bob, and he spent 45 minutes, just me and him, sat down. I couldn't believe it. It was a life-changing event. He said, you need to come to my announcing school out at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, and I did. We got to know each other. And then when I got my card in 93, I love telling this story, and I don't mean to be bragging, but you had to get your announcer card, you had to have 2 NFR announcers and a stock contractor. Well, I had Harry Vold sign for my card, and I had Clem McSpadden sign for my card, and I had Bob Tallman sign for my card. And this is one of the greatest days of my life. So I went to my very first PRCA convention in, would have been the end of 92, because 93 was my first year. I'm going to get my PRCA card, you know, December NFR 1992, and I go to the counter where the lady was set up, and I gave her my application, and she looked at that application. She said, Harry Vole, Bob Tallman, Clem McSpadden. She said, look who knows you. The greatest day of my life. I thought, man. And you know what Bob did? Bob was so kind to me. We hit it off in a deep way really quick. He told Boyd Pulhamus, who was 3 or 4 years ahead of me.
Were they kind of like announcing partners at some
Yeah,
point?
they were very close. Yeah, so he took Boyd under his wing, and I think Boyd announced a couple of NFRs before I even got my card. So he'd been at it maybe 4 or 5 years before me. I think that's how much older he is than me. But anyway, he told Bob Tallman told Boyd Pulhamus, you take Justin. He's our next guy. And you take him to that convention and you introduce him to everybody he needs to meet. And he told Boyd, he said, if you got any double booked rodeos, you give them to Justin. And he told Randy Corley and Randy Schmutz and Hadley Barrett the same thing. And between Bronk, Rumford giving me those handful of rodeos, and then what Bob Tallman did, and Jerome Robinson, my first year, I was booked solid. And I just felt like I didn't feel like I deserved it, really.
You fell in the same deal in the steer open.
I did. I know, right? I'm the luckiest guy ever.
There might have been some skill involved.
And he
too.
married above his head on top of the whole deal.
Oh, golly, I did
The
do
whole
that.
deal. Holy crap, this is the luckiest guy in the world.
Right.
Yeah, that's the
there you
truth.
go.
You bring up my wife. I can't say anything about success without Jeannie because, man, she just was perfect for what I wanted to do, and she's the calm in the middle of all my storms, and she's the voice of reason, and she's the cowboy of the family, and she taught me, well, I grew up with horses, but I didn't really know about horses, and I still don't, but what little I've been able to learn, it's all from her. And
she understood that way of life, too.
She did.
That probably helps, right?
Oh, because I was gone. We go together in the summertime, but then as my calendar got full in the wintertime, I was gone every week. I mean, I got to come home a lot. I'm not like a rodeo guy that just stayed months gone, but I was gone every week 3 or 4 days, and she had to be home alone every week for several days, and she was darn sure tough enough to do that. So,
you think working that auction block up there, talking to people and auctioneering, do you think that really helped your announcing career? Get started.
Oh, man.
Just talking clearly to people, because you have to talk clearly to people so they can hear.
Not only that, Cody, but that goes without saying, but you know what I learned as an announcer, or as an auctioneer, rather, you got to read that crowd.
Sometimes you got to bring that energy up in the crowd.
You got to know before the guy bidding knows whether he's going to bid again. And I took my auctioneering, I ain't going to talk a lot about auctioneering, but I took it to a pretty high level, that was my main goal until this announcing deal kicked in 18 or 19. And I mean, I worked at it and wanted to do it, but I did it enough where I wasn't I wasn't nowhere near a world-class auctioneer like Blaine Lott's, my neighbor down here. He's world champion, or Kyle Show, my buddy out in Montana. I wasn't nowhere near that class, but I felt like I was at a very high level at a very young age, reading that crowd. I knew if a guy was going to bid again or if he was done. I mean, I knew. And that's been the best application to announcing rodeos of any skill that I've ever brought to the announcing game.
I know another guy, he's a good auctioneer and he's a good announcer. It just seems to go hand in hand with him, and old Kyle Elwood.
Oh my goodness!
Yes. Both of your styles, now that I think about it, do remind me of a little each other.
I have such a high respect for him. He was announcing with me during that CPRA finals at Andover, and he's such a great roper too.
You had quite a run in the PBR. What was that like?
Yes, sir.
And I'll just say this now: I think you did a better job than most of the bull riders that tried to announce. I'll just get that out.
Well, maybe they need them guys in there for some technical experience, saying, "Hey, this is what happens there." But yeah, no one's compared to Justin in the PBR now.
No.
In my opinion,
that's
anyway.
Overly kind,
before or since.
I appreciate that. It was a wonderful time. Again, another story that just shouldn't have happened that did. Cass Sally is a rodeo producer from Tulsa. Cass Sally put on the rodeo at the Tulsa State Fair, and at 93, 94, I think maybe it was 94, I was announcing the PRCA rodeo at the Fairgrounds Pavilion at Tulsa, and Tuff Hedeman was still riding. Hello.
We got a Amber Alert.
Amber alert. Okay. Everybody.
Hope they find him.
I know.
Missing juvenile.
Yeah.
And
Well,
thoughts go out to those folks.
for sure. So, Tuff Hedeman was announcing, and he was in and out. I don't even know if I talked to him. I just kind of went on about my life, and my life included, on Wednesdays, sorting cattle at Parsons at the sale barn. And I had my PRCA card in 93, and I think this was 94. I think it is 95, actually, because 94 was the first PBR finals in Vegas, and I did not announce 94. But I did 95, and this is how I got started, because it happened fast. I'm sorting cattle at Parsons, and it's hot, and I'm sweaty, and I'm covered in dirt and manure, and of course there wasn't no cell phones, and I get a page from the office girl, said, Justin, you got a phone call. Well, I go answer this phone call up in the office, and the voice on the other line says, Justin, this is Tuff Hedeman. And I'm like, who is pranking me? Who in the world is trying to pull the wool over my eyes right here? And I said, yeah, right. Who is this? He said, no, it's Tuff Hedeman. He said, I rode last week in Tulsa, and I heard you announce. And he said, we started this new deal called the PBR, and we're going to Charlotte, North Carolina next week, and we need an announcer. He said, are you available? It was all I could do to not drop the phone. And I said, well, let me check my calendar. Yep, I'm open. And so I went to Charlotte and announced with Randy Corley. Got to know Randy pretty good right there. Hadn't been around him much, learned a lot. We both had a near-death experience with a sound man named Gogi. And there was alcohol and a high rate of speed out on an interstate. That's another story. That's for the extended version. Anyway,
We can use our imaginations now.
yeah, it was kind of Western, but I started. And also, my dad was president of the Livestock Marketing Association a year or two before that, or maybe 3. I was still in college, and must have been 90 or 91. And the convention was in Oklahoma City. All the livestock auction owners come to Oklahoma City, and that's where they have the World Champion Auctioneer Contest and everything. And my dad was president, and they always have big social deals, to go along with the gathering. Well, he rented the Lazy E and had a match steer roping for the people there with the livestock markets. Wow. And he had, and of course Neil Worrell came, and I can't remember who else, but I announced it. So I got to know A.G. Myers, who was running the Lazy E. He heard me announce, and then he hired me to announce Bull Nanza that same year. And then I got the circuit finals because of him and Bronk that was held at the Lazy E. But as far as the PBR goes, that first year after Tuff gathered me up, so did A.G. Myers. I was announcing all the Bull Nanzas in 1995, and you talk about over my head. I was so far over my head, I just was praying every day that nobody would find out how little experience I had. And every day, I just, Lord, help me fool them one more time. And I just kept fooling them, and I kept getting hired. And that year, I announced that at PBR World Finals #2, I was announcing alongside Bob Feist, and there's another guy that helped me. Tallman actually that same year convinced Bob I needed to come announce the Bob Feist out in Reno, and he did, and that was a neat experience too. But that's how it got started. Tuff Hedeman hired me, and then Randy Bernard came along and ran the PBR for several years, and in 2000 they bought their own television rights. And I was a PA announcer up until then, from 95 to 2000, and actually in 01's when we started our own TV deal. And Randy Bernard wanted me to be the host to do the TV, and Tuff to do the color. And Donnie Gay and Dan Miller had been doing it for years on TNN, and we switched networks. And Randy just wanted a whole new look because we're switching to our own network. That's when we went to, I believe, the Outdoor Life Network before it turned to Versus. And so we got hired in there, and much to the disgrace of the fans, or to the disgust, I should say, they didn't like me or tough, and they loved Donnie Gay and Dan Miller. That was a rough transition to TV. But then I spent 10 years doing TV with them, and I would switch back and forth. I started out as the host, but then they kind of wanted maybe more of a mainstream guy, so they got a guy by the name of Brett Haber, and they were still using Tough and occasionally Ty Murray. And so I was just kind of the middle guy. I was kind of bridging the gap between the mainstream guy that really didn't know, and then I was trying to bring in some of my announcer stuff that the bull riders weren't going to, they wasn't going to dig a lot for information.
Seemed like they had a guy in there that the public could understand what he was saying, that didn't know a whole lot about rodeo. And then Justin was there for their core people, I feel like.
There you
know.
go. Thank you.
For all their core people.
Thank you.
He spoke our language, Jimbo.
Right.
We understood what
That's
Justin
what I
was
said.
saying, and
Wow.
and everybody else, I feel like, understood what was Brett was his name?
Brett Haber.
Yep.
But if you didn't know better, you'd thought you'd rode bulls all your life. You knew enough about it to talk about it.
Jimbo, that's both of you just gave me back to back two of the kindest things anybody's ever said, and that means a lot to me because bull riding was in my blood, and I've always looked back and wished that why couldn't I just got my shoulders fixed, and why couldn't I have been around somebody that was at a high level to walk me through injuries and getting back on bulls and stuff, because that's the tipping point for so many. You got to have a high level guy there to push you, and I didn't have that. But now looking back, I know why. I wasn't supposed to be a bull rider. But back to what you said, I rode enough to know what it felt like to have a bull spin away from your hand. I knew what it felt like for one to go into your hand. I knew what rearing and a bull rearing on the front means, and I knew you had to climb over the front. I did it just enough, the very basic stuff. But it's really all you had to know because I was just dealing with the basics anyway. And I really told the line. I knew what I didn't know. And I think that's been a big key to a little success that I've had is I've always known what I didn't know, and I didn't venture over there. And I did a couple times, and Ty Murray would definitely put me in my place on national television. And that's fine.
Right.
And of course, Ty and I get along really well with all of those guys from the PBR.
You also got to see something that probably no one even realizes now. When that deal came along and you first started doing it, these were just rodeo cowboys, Jimbo, and all of a sudden all these bull riders and everybody associated with this thing were becoming superstars, household names, a lot of them, overnight.
They were.
What did you see happen with all those guys that were just becoming like super famous? Because, I was at Cheyenne after the PBR there one time. They have a PBR during the rodeo now. It used to be something else, but turned into a PBR. They had a line of girls like you'd see at a rock concert waiting on the bull riders to leave the locker room. After the thing that night. You saw that happen from the start of it.
It was so fun.
Was every town you went to just like,
town.
was it just crazy?
Like it was just crazy. It was just like, this is cowboy version of being a rock star, to watch how people reacted to those big name guys. And of course, 8 Seconds, the movie, came along at the perfect time to kind of set all of that in motion, building a huge fan base that we wouldn't have had to begin with. But I saw NASCAR. I saw NASCAR over and over and over again. I thought, man, this is the step to potentially being a game changer with these people becoming fans. And I want to say this. I want rodeo people to listen to what I'm about to say. And the reason it worked, they were pretty decent personalities and certainly deserved all the respect they had coming from a toughness standpoint and a talent standpoint. But the key thing in rodeo, our problem is we've got 110 contestants in every rodeo performance, and then a different 110 contestants at the next rodeo, and so on. We had the same 45 guys. So it was easy for you to pick out a favorite guy and get to know him and watch him and become a fan. But you get over 45 guys, everybody gets lost in the shuffle.
Anywhere from 5 to 8 events,
Yeah.
At every rodeo, that's a tougher sell to anybody.
New people coming in, just when they look at all the bull riders, like, oh, there's another 5'7" guy with a cowboy hat and jeans on. They all look the same. And that's the biggest problem that rodeo has. But because there was only 45, people were able to get to know them a little bit and connect with them a little bit and follow them a little bit. And that's the greatest advantage that the PBR ever had. And then they realized toward the end of my tenure with the PBR that 45 was too many. And so then they dropped back to 35, which was brilliant in my opinion. And that's where rodeo has got to get one of these days, is we've got to camp out on the premium superstars at a high level tour, because the big name superstars are getting diluted because there's so many people in and out of the system on a day-to-day basis that it's hard for fans to pick them out from the huge crowd.
Me as a rodeo guy, I see that, and you know the problem with it, me just looking at it from the outside in, I used to be on the inside of it, is your membership pays for everything in PR in the pro rodeo.
Exactly.
I don't feel like
more members.
They did branch off. They started the ERA with only the most elite people, and there wasn't enough sponsorship. There wasn't enough money. At the end of the day, it didn't seem like, from the outside looking in, to keep everything going. So that's what rodeo they're going to have to figure out. What the PBR figured out is a sponsorship, and they really raised their production level to, you know, it's a complete spectacle to go to one of those things.
Well, that's the other thing that separated them was the production. The level of the production has got to just. That was fun to watch the evolution of that production, continue to grow and expand.
And then when they hired old Flint Rasmussen away from, you know, where he couldn't be the entertainer at any other Western event besides theirs.
Yeah.
They were off and going. I mean, that was the perfect thing. The best rodeo entertainer that's ever lived, in my opinion. Because I saw him at Garden City at the rodeo, maybe even here at the rodeo, all the way to he can single-handedly entertain 25,000 person arena.
Yeah, one of my closest buddies, and I'm just glad we're the same age, and Flint Rasmus and I were able to work together and grow together, and we traveled together and did a lot of the same rodeos.
Well, most successful rodeo clown to ever live. I mean, by far. Usually you hear them die, end up broke and crippled and living in a camper trailer somewhere. But Flint, he's a millionaire. You know, he's a household name if you know anything about rodeo.
He's awesome. We've had a lot of fun. I've been very fortunate to have been able. I think he's another reason I had some success in the announcing business, is because we were a team at Pendleton and Ellensburg and St. Paul and Cheyenne, and that we were always pulling the same direction. You know, just like a good team of horses, they're working together to pull the load. And man, I didn't have any problem stepping aside and letting him just bask in that spotlight all he wanted.
Hey, I saw on the internet this year you got a little badge.
Oh my goodness!
Up at Cheyenne.
Oh my goodness!
How'd all this get started with Cheyenne? Holy moly! And tell us about the call you got and how you got it.
You old steer ropers, you too, you're going to love this story, because the old steer roping deal. I may not have won a lot of money at the pro level like I wanted to, but the old steer roping deal paid dividends.
Well, you held your own. I mean, you placed a lot of places and you entered a lot of places where you were announcing. I mean,
well, I don't know about that, but I know this. It got me some rodeos. It got me some respect, maybe that early in my career maybe I didn't have coming, but I did because I was a contestant. And I got Cheyenne because Tom Hersig was the chairman, and he was a steer roper, and they were going to make a change. And they were looking at Randy Corley and Boyd Polhamus and me, and I never dreamed I would, even get it. I was just glad to be in the conversation. And then I got the phone call, and he said, "We picked you." And he didn't know me from I guarantee you he knew me from my steer roping before he knew me as an announcer. Same goes for Ellensburg after Phil Gardenhire passed away. Ken McRae he's the rodeo chairman. He's a steer roper. He heard me announcing the PBR at Pendleton, and he's like, "Who is that guy?" And they said, "Well, he's the steer roper." He's like, "He's an announcer that ropes steers, and he sounds like that." And so he hunted me up after there, and I went to Ellensburg, and same with Pendleton. So it was steer roping definitely. I think my career earnings because of steer roping ended up pretty good.
Right.
What's it like standing out there on the edge of that announcer stand to the most famous rodeo and one of the biggest outdoor venues there is.
Yeah.
You know, what's that like to just walk up there and do that the first time, Justin?
Well, I was terrified at the highest level the first time. First of all, following Hadley Barrett, which, I wasn't real comfortable how all that went down just because I had so much respect for him. But, I kind of had to take the job, too. And I was very uncomfortable about that just because I was so obliged to him helping me out.
Well, a lot of things run their course,
well,
there's a lot of uncomfortable transitions, no doubt, like when they moved Dan Taylor out and then when they moved Harry Gold out. I mean, there's always got to be an uncomfortable transition.
It's
no
just
doubt
life.
about it.
But I was laughing because now I'm doing television at Cheyenne. I was laughing because Garrett Yergin is now the announcer and does a phenomenal job. And again, he's got all these assets. I didn't even have music. They had these horn speakers that were just horrible that would bounce around. Nobody could understand what I was saying. They didn't even have a horn an 8-second horn for the end of a bronc ride. They had a dadgum 45 pistol that they shot off every time. I mean, it was still old school when I moved in there. But that's why Tom Hersig hired Flint and me, was to come in there and to step it into a modern era, and that's what we did, and that's why we got those badges. And so I'm glad you brought that up. That's how Cheyenne started, and then I announced it for 15 years, and then here comes transition. This time it's not working in my favor, and Andy Stewart got the call to announce, and I was heartbroken. I mean, because when I stepped in that announcer stand at Cheyenne after all the years, that was my house. That announcer's box, that was my home. That was Cheyenne, the town, the committee, the community. Everything about it became a big part of my identity, and absolutely ripped my heart out. I never saw it coming, and I still don't know why, and that's fine because I love what I do now. Now at the Cowboy Channel, I've been there for the last 3 years and get to do the pre-show and come up with all these stories that I found out about when I was there roping and then announcing, and I know all if I'm onto a story, I know exactly who to contact because they know what I need to know to tell this story. But it was a great time in my life, and then I announced it 15 years. I made the short go 5 times.
You had a very successful Cheyenne run as a roper, one of the most actually.
I didn't ever finish the deal very good. But I made
you had the opportunity. Holy moly, come back winning it. I don't even know how many times, Jimbo. First or second, I'm not even kidding you, Justin. And he was announcing the dang rodeo at the same time and roping in the short round.
Crazy.
That was the ultimate dream, because I knew I couldn't enter enough rodeos to make the NFR, because I could only get to the ones I was announcing and then maybe 3 or 4 or 5 others. And my greatest regret is that I didn't make the finals. Finished 18th one year, as close as I got. And but I still wouldn't. Again, I wouldn't change. Yeah, I wanted to be a bull rider too, but I wouldn't change it. I mean, looking back, it all worked out really well. But stepping out of that announcer stand and riding my horse in the box as the high call. Here's another funny story. Oh gosh, this is one of my favorite stories. The year I was winning Cheyenne by a mile on 2, and I go in the short go, and of course the steer rope and short go at Cheyenne falls apart every year. I don't know if I've seen maybe one decent short go, and it did.
They used to take 15 to the short round there. Jim Davis, he came back 15th one time and won it.
Right.
Yeah. So, and all the newspapers, the headlines in the sports section said the announcer did what? And I'm coming back winning that thing, and I'm getting the rodeo started, and I get on my horse and ride down there, and I'm getting ready to rope my steer. And like I said, I got to do that 5 times. That was the ultimate for me. This is at the top of my career, where I can combine announcing at a high level and competing at a high level. But this is the funny part. The year I was winning by a mile, all I had to do was tie that steer down. 30 seconds. And I was up all night. I was a wreck on this one. And this is my ultimate dream. I'm finally going to get because I never really, outside of our steer roping circles, I don't think I really got the respect from like the press or the PRCA that, hey, this is the only announcer at the high level as a competitor. And, nobody ever did a story about it, really.
Well, ain't too many about Guy Allen either.
Yeah. Well, it might be steer roping, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought, I'm going to show him this time. Well, I get out there, and of course, I split his horns. And I mean, I'm crushed.
I felt so bad for him.
Oh, man. And
Was it one loop then?
Oh, yeah, one loop. And I don't think I'd ever missed a steer at Cheyenne until that. And I missed that sucker. But here's what I had to do. Steer roping was the second event. I had to go back up there and act happy for the next 3 hours. And I mean, I am stomping and cussing and throwing. I mean, I'm turning over trash cans on the way back up to the announcer stand.
Must have been pretty bad because I've never even heard him say a cuss word, Jimbo.
Oh my gosh, it was so ugly. And then I get up there and I'm just still stomping, and I turn that microphone on. I'm just gritting my teeth, and I'm back into, all right, let's go to our next event, and yada yada yada. And time to saddle bronc riding, and here comes Billy Etbauer on Painted Valley. And I'd turn that microphone off and go, son of a, oh, I can't believe it. Oh, no, this didn't happen. All right, there he goes, 89 points. Give it up for Billy. And I'd turn that microphone off and just go, oh, no. How in the world did I miss him? I was just
and to split the horns. I mean, if you're a steer roper, you'd rather
No.
not even touch the horns to split the
I'd
horns,
rather
honestly.
just frisbee one over the top of him, or rope him around the neck, or hit him in the butt. But you are exactly that. Splitting the horns is the cardinal sin. So,
It makes you feel the worst when you do it, for sure.
I'm still not over it.
Now, I can
The
tell.
next year's going to be 20 years, and I'm still not over it. Because I would have made the finals.
No doubt about
I
it.
would have won Cheyenne. I mean, it was.
You'd had one Cheyenne
I'd have had
buckles.
me.
You know,
Never got a major.
right.
I second at Cheyenne, second at Pendleton, second at Dodge City. Never got a major.
Well, the one of the years I about made the finals, Justin, I think it was 18th or 19th, and I ended up untying steers at the finals that year, so that was a pretty big
Let
Oh,
down.
downer.
Cody.
That was a pretty big downer.
No.
I had sorting steers and everything else, but
And you were, 3 spots out.
yeah.
Cody, that's
Yeah.
a terrible story.
Well, it's just about as bad to have to go back up there and finish announcing Cheyenne after you split the
Hey,
horns.
speaking of untying steers, right here at Coffeyville, Clem was announcing Guy Allen sets the all-time record for the fastest steer ever tied. I think it was 8-1, right?
At that time, yes, sir.
And Clem, the next day, we were sitting right here at this table. Oh, my gosh, how ironic. And he said, Justin, he said, I messed up. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, after Guy got done tying the fastest steer ever, because I was announcing horseback, Clem was upstairs, he said, I should have stopped the show and had you untie that steer. And I'm like, why? He said, well, that way, Guy Allen could have tied the fastest steer in the history of rodeo, and I could say that you untied the fastest steer in rodeo.
Yeah, that would work.
I'm like, yeah, dang, why didn't you think of that?
Who's holding the record right now? Is it Cody? Is Cody Scheck still
Cody
holding
Scheck,
the
I
record?
think, yeah.
This was always a fast rodeo. The way that it was always set up, I always felt like
Yeah.
they tied the heck out of steers at this rodeo.
I know.
Cody
This
Scheck did it at Fort Smith.
Yeah.
But this always seemed like a good rodeo. That
It was
they
always,
could press that arena.
That was not my game. That was not my game.
Justin, I want to go back to a day when probably had to be the toughest announcing day you ever had. That was September 11, 2001.
Jimbo.
What that had to be just eerie. I mean, I can't imagine announcing a rodeo.
How did you come up with that question? That is an excellent question.
Cody, don't call me a rodeo historian. For
Oh, man, you are the master. That's one of the best questions anybody's ever asked me. Man, that was a powerful day. I got to make sure I maintain my composure here. I was at Pendleton. We were staying at the Oxford Suites just down the road from the arena. And I say my wife was with me. Flint Rasmussen was next door. Joe Bumgardner, the bullfighter, was the next door down. And Flint knocks on my door and he said, turn your TV on right now. And so I did. And of course, I saw what everybody saw that day. And pretty soon my dad called and said, hey, make sure your motorhome's got plenty of fuel. And I really wasn't worried from that standpoint because I had a lot of friends in Pendleton. I think I was going to be all right.
Not a bad place to
Not
hang
a
out.
bad place to get stuck. And I was so proud that the committee decided to push through. And that was a real hard thing to do. but I just had to remember my roots and my early beginnings is just be me and share your heart, and don't be afraid of what that might sound like or look like. And hey, we're all in this together. And in a lot of those times, those tough times, I would think, what would Bob Tallman say? One of the first things he told me was, hey, if things go bad, you've got to keep people from being hysterical, no matter whatever kind of a catastrophes happen. And then Clem McSpadden was always so cool and so calm and so methodical. And I thought, what would Clem say? And I remember having those thoughts, and God just brings the words when you humble yourself and rely on something that's stronger than you. And that's what I had to do. But the next year, while I'm announcing Pendleton, the year anniversary, you talk about getting chills right now. During the opening ceremonies, and if you've never been to Pendleton to see the opening, there's nothing more powerful and there's nothing more simple than the opening at Pendleton. It is powerfully moving. They had the fighter jets flying over at the very end of the national anthem in perfect timing. Nobody could have scripted this, and it seemed like they were only 30 feet off the ground. And those fighter jets came busting over that arena, and that American flag with a guy a horseback was just a busting around that track. And then Chuck Lopeman, who's playing the music there, is playing Toby Keith. And about that time you hear, we'll stick a boot in your ass. That's the American way. And I mean, everybody just lost it. They're crying and cheering and yelling. And that was the most powerful moment of my career.
Wow.
Great question.
You know what I love about Pendleton and the opening ceremonies of it? When they turn the queens out of those two.
And they jump the
gates.
rail?
They jump the rail. Most time, they're waving with both hands to the crowd like that.
Yes.
Right.
And they're wearing their buckskins. Yeah, Justin's got a rodeo tonight, so they're probably going to be getting pretty close.
Yeah, we're getting.
Okay, we're all good.
Yeah.
But anyway, Jimbo, the two queens, or I don't know how many of them there are, I just always noticed two. They come busting out of the gates on either side of the buck and shoots there.
Mm-hmm.
And they come straight to the crowd right there at that big deal, but there's the fence around the track, and they jump it. And a lot of times they let go of both hands and wave at the crowd right there.
Well,
but they're in their buckskins.
In mid-jump.
Yeah, it's great.
Man, it is awesome. Everything about it's awesome.
Well, it's the greatest rodeo going. It's the greatest rodeo.
It's the most unique by far.
Well, they're sticking with a lot of their traditions a lot more than a lot of other rodeos. But I still love Cheyenne. I feel like it's hollow ground.
I love them all for different reasons.
I feel like Pendleton's hollow ground too.
Oh, most definitely.
I get every time I go to one of those places, I'd get butterflies in my stomach just thinking about everybody that came before me, all the greats. And
when is the Cowboy Channel going to get on DirecTV basic programming?
Man,
That's a sore spot with me.
Man,
Boy.
I'm not qualified to even answer that. I don't know. I know it's a big hit that we're not there, and hopefully it will. I know that Dish understands rural America. Dish Network appreciates who we are and what we need. And Direct just don't give two spits.
I feel like they're just giving the middle America the middle finger.
That's exactly what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. But you know what? There's too many advantages with the Cowboy Channel Plus app to worry about it. I mean,
but I don't have good internet out of my house.
That's Jimbo's problem. He ain't got the internet to run it.
Yeah, I can
I'm
relate
waiting on
to that.
Probably a lot of rural America.
I
I
know.
just now got internet at
I
our
know.
house not too long ago.
Yeah, but the app is phenomenal. Right. Oh,
it's great.
I love this app. It's got every show on the Cowboy Channel archived forever. We can watch Cheyenne from 3 years ago. We can watch Pendleton every year. I mean, it lives there. You can pull it up on demand.
I go down wormholes. I end up watching Canadian chuck wagon racing.
Yeah.
All of them. It's crazy.
That's great. That is great.
Yeah. They love that sport up there, man.
Oh, yeah.
I'm getting to be more and more of a fan of it just because of the Cowboy Channel.
I love
I
that.
understand it a lot better now.
That's cool.
Did you ever imagine the Cowboy Channel would be what it's been or turn into what it's been turned into?
Yeah, yes and no. Yes, because I've really struggled with pro rodeo for a long time because I'm working for the PBR doing television from 2000. So for 20 years, I'm looking over my shoulder going, rodeo, come on, because rodeo's my heart and soul.
Sure.
I mean, bull riding, the PBR was great, but it was a job. My passion is all the events, is rodeo. It's the communities, that have rodeos. It's not the coliseums and the airports and the same Marriott every week. I mean, that got old. I was very thankful the whole time, but it got old compared to rodeo. But I'm looking over my shoulder going, rodeo, why are we? I never watched a rodeo on TV, a pro rodeo, until the Cowboy Channel because they were 3 months delayed and there was some obscure time and place.
Oh, yeah. Remember the NFR used to come on at 2 o'clock in the morning or
What
1
the
o'clock in the
heck?
morning, we'd all stay up till daylight
And
watching it.
When the NFR was all 10 performances and you stayed up late enough to watch it or you hit your VCR to tape it and it was current.
A lot of times hockey pushed it back.
Yeah, either got pushed back, but the greatest stars were only in the arena for 15 or 20 seconds. You still don't get to know anybody or connect. The questions were like rapid fire. You got 8 seconds to reply. It was horrible. Everything about pro rodeo TV before the Cowboy Channel was wrong. It was terrible. And the number one rule in television is consistent time slot on a consistent day. PBR, Sunday night, 7 o'clock, bam. 90% of their work is done because they got a consistent time slot on a consistent day every week. You can count on it. Rodeo never had that, and it is still beyond me. And I'm not pointing a finger at any single person. I'm pointing my finger at all the people. I'm still mad that we're 25 years behind. And we're just now getting where we can do what the BRO was doing in 1991, for crying out loud.
I heard some guys here.
You can tell that's been frustrating. Right.
We've had a couple old grouchy old timers on this show, and they think that it's going to cost spectators going to the rodeo and this. And I said, no, sir, no. Actually, it's going to do the opposite.
Not even close.
If you're exactly watching Cheyenne on TV and you're a fan of rodeo and you see what's going on out there and you see that big carnival back there and they got the biggest stars in the game singing every night and they got the biggest stars in the rodeo roping every day and you see what the atmosphere is like on TV, it makes you want to go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just like try to buy a ticket to the Super Bowl. Good luck.
Yep.
Same difference.
It's working.
It's not gonna hurt the crowd any. And in fact, before it came along, I would try to explain to people rodeos like Cheyenne with the hand pull barrier and Pendleton, how they run their barrier and how they set up the bull riding panels around the bull riding, out of these PVC panels that they're just held up by.
You got to see it. You can't even explain it.
You can't explain it,
No.
but now everybody can see what
Yeah.
because I couldn't even fathom when I was young before I went to like Pendleton exactly how they run them. I'm like,
exactly.
Say what again? The steer passes you, and the guy's running horseback beside you.
Right.
Not what? Yeah. Well, I saw a few pictures, but that's about it, in the sports news. But now we can see. Now we can get to know a lot of these guys. I feel like, and it's just great. It's just really great.
It's been a fun ride. I always knew rodeo had potential, so I guess it's really not a surprise. I don't mean to sound like I'm smart or anything, but I knew if we just had a chance to tell stories. And that was my key on the PBR because I was the guy telling the stories about Blueberry Wine and Little Yellow Jacket. And I was the guy writing the scripts. And so I knew, and Clem McSpadden was always on my mind and still is to this day because he was the master storyteller. And that's my goal, is to be the master storyteller. But that's what I did then and that's what I do now. And that part of it is a little bit of a surprise because I never knew how fulfilling and rewarding it would be to be able to be the storyteller. And the coolest thing about telling stories is always about great people that have done incredible things against enormous odds, you've been knocked down over and over, but you keep getting up. I feel like I've got the greatest opportunity to inspire people. It's the greatest pulpit because these stories all encourage and inspire people that, hey, I can pick myself up one more time. I can go on and do that. And that's been the most rewarding thing, is to see the difference in people's lives because they saw a story, and I'm just the other thing about it is it's virgin ground. This is uncharted territory. Nobody's ever told these stories before. So not only are they rewarding and gratifying, but nobody's ever told them. So I get to tell the story for the first time, which is unbelievable.
I love that. That's kind of what me and Jimbo's trying to do. We're trying to keep.
Yeah, you're doing.
We're
it,
telling
for
a lot
sure.
of stories, but we're trying to keep a lot of memories alive
Right.
of some of the greats that, you know, there's a lot of great guys going right now.
Oh man,
But a lot of our new fans, they don't know
right.
the people that came before.
Oh, and you got to know your history to know where you're going to need to go in the
For
future.
sure. Cowboy Channel.
Yes, sir.
How'd the whole thing come along?
Well,
I remember you were living up in Oklahoma here,
yes, sir.
but working in Fort Worth. That was his commute
Yeah.
every week, I think.
Hey, what about that bar burning down? Have you walked around there and looked it over?
Haven't been down by there yet.
Jimbo.
It happened during Cheyenne, I think.
Do you know I used to live above that bar, Jimbo? The Cadillac.
It doesn't surprise me.
Cadillac.
Yeah, there was a fellow by the name of Doug Dugan. He had every rough stock rider in the country. At Larry Sandvik, Denny McClanahan, all of them. They were all working for him, building these playgrounds all over the United States. Well, I fell in with the crew. And guess where their office was, Jimbo?
Above the Cadillac.
Right
bar.
above the Cadillac, and that's where the couch was. I slept every night.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
I tried to sneak down in the Cadillac a few
Yeah.
times. They let me in a few times. I got kicked out quite a few times.
I can imagine.
Can't believe it burned down, though. I heard it's good to go.
I don't know.
They said just a little smoke damage in the bar.
I'm
Just
interested.
the,
Really?
just
The
the
flames were
apartments upstairs.
huge.
Yeah, it looked like it was a lost cause.
Oh,
you know.
I know.
I saw some pictures of the inside of it. Looks like it's all still
well,
there.
That's one of. It's been so stinking hot down there. The 1 week I was home, I was like, "Damn, gum."
But I tell you what, if you ever
Good
get a chance to go there, if you haven't been, well, a lot of wealth of rodeo history inside the walls of that bar.
Mm-hmm.
Every rodeo cowboy that probably ever stepped foot in Fort Worth at one time or another went in there, and they got a lot of pictures of a lot of them in there.
Right.
It's pretty cool.
Cool.
It's definitely the rodeo cowboy bar of Fort Worth, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Cowboy
that's
Channel has a bar too.
We
but-
do, yeah, we do. Yeah, Patrick, he called me. Of course, a lot of people don't realize that I did the broadcast for the American since the very beginning, and that was because of Randy Bernard, who ran the PBR, that wanted me to
That
take
thing
over
has
TV.
grown by
Yeah.
leaps and bounds, it seems like. It started out just kind of this obscure event, but it's gotten bigger and bigger and big. Now it's huge.
And we used our production crew that we were doing the PBRs together, the same crew, same technicians and sound people.
Didn't they start that thing in the American Airlines Center over in Dallas?
No, the first one
the
was
original American, Daryl Barron and them put on a great big rodeo that was the precursor
yeah.
to this American rodeo in the American Airlines Center.
Yeah.
It was a big one.
They did do a big one, but it really wasn't associated.
Was it not?
No, Patrick Gotch and Randy Bernard Randy did. He came up with that idea, and it was on RFD TV every year
Right, I
before the
remember.
Cowboy Channel. And so I had worked for Patrick, and then we did a pre-show at the NFR for the last 3 or 4 years before the Cowboy Channel too. So I was working for him part-time. He called me about the Cowboy Channel in 2019, and he said, "Hey, why don't you come to work for me?" And I said, I'm kind of in a good spot. Thanks, but no thanks. And he called me 3 months later, and he said, "Hey," he said, "I've just signed the PRCA to a 6-year deal. What do you think about reconsidering coming to work for me?" And I'm like, "Oh, you've got my attention now." And so that was pretty impressive that he did that. And yeah, I did in 2020. The end of 2019. Well, not in 19, we also did Cheyenne. Joe Beaver and I actually did it in the studio that's there now in 19 before the Cowboy Channel launched full time. And so we had maybe even 18 and 19. And so I went to work the fall of 19, and then we went into 20, and I was driving back, 5.5 hours from Lenapaw, Oklahoma, right here south of Coffeyville, down to Fort Worth every week, and toward the we had to deal with COVID, and I started realizing that we were still going through COVID. I better start looking for a place down here, and down here being Texas. And I thought we'd just kind of find a small place and maybe just spend the winter down there. I never thought we'd sell the ranch here that we put together, but we found an incredible place down around Hyco, Texas, and Cowboy Channel was just getting more demanding, which was fine. And they're doing a lot less cattle and a whole lot more TV. And then I was realizing, because I thought I would just go down and kind of help them for a year and go back to ranching or something, but I could tell that wasn't going to happen, and that this was going to be a long-term deal. And so sold the ranch and moved to Texas, and I couldn't be happier. I mean, I am off the charts happy with where I'm at and what I'm able to do.
You do a great job, and you're a great ambassador for rodeo.
Thanks, Jimbo.
sure.
You got to feel right at home there at Fort Worth, working in the cell barn there.
I know, right?
Yeah, right in the cell rings where they come from, Jimbo.
That's our studio. Is
They
in
still
the
got
old,
all the chairs.
Yeah, the old livestock auction building is where is our studio. And it sat empty for almost 20 years, and Patrick Gotch went in there and he cleaned it out and spent a lot of money in making it a state-of-the-art television studio. So I'm literally standing in the middle of the cell ring, just exactly where I was when I was 4 or 5 years old. It's another full circle moment. That almost every time I step in there, I'm go, wow.
What was Patrick Gotch's connection to rodeo? Did he have any, or how did he come up?
He didn't. He's a farmer.
Okay.
From up around Omaha, and of course the Gotch family. His dad had like 6 or 7 brothers, and they had trucks and they had trucking companies back in the 40s and 50s. There's a book. I've read the story about the Gotch family, and everybody in the cattle business knows that the Gotch family is highly involved on a large scale in the feedlot business and grass cattle. They've got cattle everywhere, and that's his Patrick Gotch's cousins that are in the feedlot business. And so they do a lot of cattle. But Patrick, he doesn't have a cowboy background. It all goes back to the American. His connection is Randy Bernard came to, they got together. Actually, when Randy Bernard worked for Patrick full time after the PBR days, had RFD TV. And he's like, let's create this big rodeo, the American, and let's put it on your network. The American is how the Cowboy Channel was born. Good, another great question. God, no wonder I'm such a fan of you guys all the time.
It seems like you've stayed true to your roots, though, and haven't forgot where you came from, for sure. And I don't know, this is just from the outside looking in and total guess. It seems like you still announced this rodeo. It seems like you still announced the Abbeville rodeo. You used to announce Cushing before
Yes.
it was no longer a rodeo, I think.
Right.
And maybe another one in Oregon or something. St. Paul.
Yep.
Seemed like you do a lot there.
Yeah. And
How do you find time to come announce these rodeos when you're supposed to be on the TV telling everybody about all these rodeos
I
all
told
week?
Patrick, I said, yeah, I'll come to work, but I am not going to walk away from these communities. It's not about announcing the rodeo. It's not about getting paid to do that. It's about these communities that's become a huge part of my life. And when you've been going someplace for 20 or 25 or 30 years in some cases, I've told people at Abbeville, Kansas, that if y'all decide to change announcers, that's fine with me, but I'm still showing up.
They still have the sod house there?
No, they had to take the sod house down. It was falling down, kind of getting to be dangerous.
I went when they first built that sod house.
Oh, I love that old sod house.
Can't believe they haven't rebuilt it. What the heck?
Yeah, well, there's nobody around that knows how to do that anymore.
Right,
All the old timers that
Yeah,
knew
they
how to
did.
do
They
that
had
are
this
gone.
they had this little deal. They'd fill it up with dirt and then pack it in there and then make a brick, I
Yeah,
guess,
a
just made out of
brick
dirt.
and build. That's how they build
Yep.
houses out on the prairie. Yeah, but no, I'm not leaving. And I left Pendleton one year because the PBR was going on Fox Sports for the first time, and it was a big deal. And I left, and I lost the rodeo, and I swore right then I will never walk away from a great rodeo contract, no matter what. And so I told Patrick, I said, hey, I'm gonna do the time event championship. And I got these 5 or 6 rodeos, and that's just going to be part of the deal.
I can't imagine Abbeville's the greatest rodeo contract or this one, either one. I think he's sticking to his roots, Jimbo. That's what I think.
All it is. No doubt.
Definitely not about the money, but I wouldn't trade it. This is,
It's like when Waylon went back and sang a concert in Deerfield or something,
You're right.
Littlefield.
Waylon, right.
Yeah, like when Waylon went back, sang a concert over there in Littlefield. Or when one of those big guys come home.
right.
That's what it seems like to me.
Justin, who would you put on your Mount Rushmore of announcers? Need 4 names.
Well, Clem McSpadden and Bob Tallman. There's just 4, right?
Yeah.
I got to put Hadley Barrett up there with him.
Can't
And it-
leave him off.
No.
He was one of the greatest.
God, amazing personality and the passion that he had for the game and the passion they had. He loved people, and all three of them guys.
Yeah, right.
But you got to go back. You got to get somebody from before my time, and when I was in college, getting really interested in pursuing this, I read a book about Cy Talon.
Yeah.
You know, and he was a guy that was in the 40s and 50s and 60s, and
He announced Ben Johnson before.
No
I got an old
kidding?
program
Yeah, I
of him.
think
Yes,
so,
sir.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he had a little
that
mustache.
right?
if I
Yeah, they
remember.
had all the big guys announcing that
Oh,
thing
my
through the
goodness.
years back in the day.
Floyd Watts used to announce it.
well, I'd have to go with Cy Talon.
Yeah.
He was from Montana. You know, he did the Cow Palace and he did Denver, and I think I don't think he did San Antonio, and I can't remember wherever he went, but it was. He would be more the godfather. But I love rodeo history. I mean, I love rodeo history. And there's an old announcer, his name was Foghorn Clancy,
Right.
back in the teens and
He was a
20s.
writer too. He wrote
Yeah,
a lot about rodeo.
I've got his book. I'm a Gene Beals, or maybe it was Donna Clark. One of them had found me that book because I knew I'm a Gene or Donna had one. And I'm like, oh, would I love to get that book? And they found me one.
I've
And
got one.
Do you really?
A guy loaned it to me. I got to send it back to him.
My 50 Years in Rodeo, I think, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Is what it's called.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but I gotta go with and Pete Logan would be another one of those guys that I never knew, never even heard, but was iconic. He would be a close fifth probably, in my opinion. But yeah, so Clem, Bob Tallman, Hadley Barrett, and Cy Talon.
Yeah.
Yeah, stick
Pretty
with
good
that.
list.
What about rodeos? What's your 4 best rodeos?
Well,
Not that you had to announce or anything.
No, I haven't thought about. Well, I think it's pretty easy. I mean, Calgary Stampede and Cheyenne and Pendleton. And
There's so many. I always throw Pecos on mine because I love it so much.
Yeah.
of course, I'm partial to Ellensburg.
That's a great. All those rodeos up there are just the
It's
best.
just-
They treat
I
everybody
just-
so well.
That's my favorite rodeo town of all of them. I'll just say that right now. Ellensburg is my favorite town. I know more people and have close contact and relationship with people in Ellensburg than any place. So
They love that rodeo.
I
there.
would say definitely Ellensburg. But then, of course, Houston and San Antonio and all of them, they're going to. I'm sorry. To me, rodeo, and those are wonderful places, and I thank God for them, but rodeo is meant to be played outside if you're going to talk about the 4 greatest.
Right.
It's tough to put the 4 greatest rodeos
Oh, yeah. It's tough
in
to
on
pick
deal.
the
I mean,
four.
Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
You know. Did you announce Madison Square Garden, that bull riding they have there? Did you go out there with them?
I did
That was
TV.
the last. That's probably the last rodeo or livestock event probably to ever be held at Madison Square Garden.
I worked in
possibly.
Madison Square Garden. I was doing TV at the time, but yeah, for the PBR many times.
What the heck was that like? Bringing everything into Madison Square Garden, downtown New York City.
It was wild.
How did they unload the bulls? Where did they keep them?
Well, they kept them a long ways away, or they kept them in the building. That thing's like 4 different stories, Madison Square Garden. And I remember there's a huge ramp that goes on. It circles the arena. It's a driving ramp that would circle it was inside, but it would circle the outside, and you would go like a spiral staircase around that building up to the different levels, and the bulls would have to jog all the way around and up and all the way around and up, and it was wild. But the people, the protesters and stuff was constant all the time. It was, it was a great
I
experience.
bet they had their fair share of fans there too, though.
Yeah, and they were rowdy. I mean, they were involved, and I mean, the New York sports fans came out, and they would boo and hiss, and they'd throw popcorn or whatever. It's a whole nother level of fandom. Even though they didn't even know what's going on, if they didn't like a call. I mean, people were just ready to tear the place down.
You should have Bobby Del Vecchio as the color man there.
I did. I actually did a bull riding event with Bobby Del Vecchio out in Arizona in 2020.
Oh, no kidding.
Randy Bernard he told Patrick, said, "Hey, you need to give Bobby. You got big personality," and so he came out and I got to work with him.
No kidding.
Bobby Del Vecchio. Yeah.
What's the future looking like for you?
Oh, for me personally?
Yeah.
Ooh, I think I found my forever. home.
Can you believe they pay you to do all that down there?
No, it's. I mean, yeah, we haven't even talked about the stockyards much and the energy in that place and how fun that whole little area has become, and to watch it grow and to keep its tradition to all the heritage. They're able to grow and expand and build and recreate, but the Western influence is still at the heart of everything they do at the stockyards. I love watching. I'll sit there on the porch of our office building there and watch all the people walk up, thousands of people in a day, and they're there for one reason. They want just a little glimpse into my world, just for a few minutes, and that means the world to me. That's a big deal to me. And I'm so thankful. And they might be complete foreigners that's only here for a few days or what have you. And I've found that I like being nice to people I don't have anything in common with, just because it's the right thing to do and it makes their day. And specifically at the stockyards, man, it's a happy place. It's a happening place, and it's a happy place. And you've been down there with me.
I couldn't believe there. I used to live there, Jimbo. It was a good place to get in a good fight and drink a good beer. Just a few years ago. Now, I mean, you bring your whole family. You can spend it's like the Beverly Hills of the cowboy world. They got that Drover Hotel. He took me back around by the pool, and it was just amazing. And the architecture, they stayed with the same mule barns and stuff they always had, but now there's restaurants in them and all kinds of fun stuff. And it's really unbelievable the transition that the stockyard has made in the last
And then what you saw
15, 20 years.
I kept running into people that I know that don't necessarily work with the Cowboy Channel, but there's a community of people down there.
Oh yeah,
that I've gotten to know, and so that part of it's a lot of fun. And I never dreamed that I'd be working in a city. In fact, somebody asked me one time, "What's your greatest fear?" And I said, "Working in a major city, going to a job in a major city, fighting traffic and all that." I love it. I love it.
He's the king of the stockyards. He loves it.
I'm not the king. I'm the mayor.
Yeah, okay,
that's what you said.
Yeah.
You said, "You're like the mayor." I said, "Yeah, that's right, Cody Gardner. I am the mayor of the stockyards."
You look like you're having a good time. I like your Facebook Lives when you just walk through visit with people and the chuck wagons. They had a big chuck wagon deal there one time. And
that's coming up again pretty
quick. Red Stego. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
It's a fun place. I'm excited about the future, and I don't know. I've reached a level of confidence in what I'm doing that I never even dreamed possible. Because I was always part in rodeo, part in the PBR, part in ranching. I was never all in the rodeo business. I wasn't like Tallman and Hadley Barrett. I mean, they live it every day for their whole career. I've never done that ever. Part contestant, whatever. I was never fully engaged. Now I am, and it's a lot easier. I very much enjoy being in it every day, and that way I don't have to just kill myself every day to try to come up with stuff to say.
Still roping any?
Not a bit. No. Well, I say that. I always rope. Of course, I don't trip steers anymore. My knees, I just kept blowing knees, and Pendleton's been really hard on my knees. I've left I think 3 ACLs there. I don't know.
Pendleton was hard on me too, but for other reasons, Jimbo.
I don't even have time. I just don't have time. I'm working. All my days off, when I'm at home, that means I'm just working 8 hours on Cowboy Channel stuff. I'm just doing it from home. But when I go on Thursday, I'm working a lot of 12, 14, 16-hour days, most every Thursday. Everybody says, "You're there all the time." I'm not really, but I put in a lot of hours. I mean, it's like ranching. I mean, it's a 80, 90, 100 hours a week.
Well, guys like us don't really matter.
It don't matter. That's part of it. And my boss appreciates that. He grew up working. People say, "Man, you work all the time." I said, "Well, I work all the time, but I know what hard work really is, and what I'm doing ain't it."
I'm getting away with something here, boys.
Right.
So, I got that, and but I'm excited about where we're going. I'm excited about the future of the Cowboy Channel. I think the best is yet to come. I think the rodeo, especially the destination rodeos, as you alluded to a moment ago, Cheyenne was up 40,000 tickets this year. 40, and they were up 30,000 last year. And that's I'm going to say it. I might be wrong, but I think it's 100% Cowboy Channel. And the popularity of the cowboy is not a fad. This isn't urban cowboy stuff. This stuff is here for a long time, and that excites me a lot.
I think every rodeo is a destination rodeo. If you ain't been to one, get to one.
That's a great statement.
You'll love it.
That's a great statement.
You'll love it. Because they treat you right at a rodeo. No doubt about it.
That's a
They
great
appreciate the fans and just everything. They just appreciate having it. They appreciate the communities having it. So,
And you can bring your family.
like this one, this is great. They got the small county fair, actually pretty big county fair, the rodeo. They got the carnival. I mean, what more would you want?
Here's what I've been able to enjoy. It's the event of the year for that community. And for those of us in the rodeo business, we get to go from this community's biggest event of the year. The next week, we get to go to that community's biggest event of the year. Right. And so you talk about an amazing lifestyle. I'm very thankful.
Hey, what's the worst weather you had to announce in? That they had they let the rodeo just keep going before we get off here.
Well, I've announced this one in a lot of rain right here. It's
pretty bad right here sometimes.
Right here, it's rained hard. But the worst weather that I've ever announced in was in Garden City. It was in the 1st of June, and a rainy cold front came through. Then it had been hot, but it got down to like the low 50s or something, and it seemed like it was 19 degrees that time. I don't know, Brad, if you were there too, but that stands out as the worst conditions ever. It was miserable. And the wind was just a howling too.
One time I went to Odessa in January, and they had the steer open outside before they had
I've got a story.
roof. Before they had the roof over the arena, Jimbo, they, just like that first national finals that your grandpa won, you know how they waived the dress code because it was so cold, let them wear whatever they want. They let them do that at Odessa, but it was snowing straight down. This is crazy. The ground was completely frozen.
Yes.
You know, they had a fire over there by the box people were standing around.
That's
the worst weather one I've ever been to.
That was the worst. You're right. You're exactly right. And your dad, Rocky Garnett, I'll never forget this because they did away with the dress code. And I mean, it was cold.
It was bad.
And I had some bib overalls, the Carhartt bib overalls. And by golly, I put those on and I was all right. And your dad walked up and looked me up and down. He said, you look like a pig farmer in those, don't you? I've never wore Carhartt bib overalls ever. That was the last day.
Right.
Can you hear your dad saying that?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Oh yeah, he didn't allow any overalls around the house.
At least
the
you did
bib
say
ones
you
anyway.
roped like a pig farmer.
I did, and I roped like a pig farmer for sure.
I tell you what, your robe's awful limber in Odessa on that morning.
That is for sure.
If you got a poly, for sure.
Gosh, I can't believe you brought that up. You're right. That was the coldest I've ever been. Was in Odessa that year.
And someone had me convinced drinking cold beer made your body warm. After the roping.
That works all the time.
Yeah,
And,
every time.
Yeah, and so that's what I was going on after the rope, and that's the only way I survived it.
Right.
Oh my gosh! Hey, I got one bone to pick with you guys before we get off here, though. You interviewed two of my most anticipated personalities on here, and the other day you had Roy Duval. But several weeks ago, you had Alan Keller. You've had them both on here, and you never asked either one of them about the bar fight that they had together when they went nose to nose and toe to toe. That's one of the greatest.
We had a second one with Alan Keller.
You missed
and
the
we asked
second
him.
one with Keller because he explained
Did he
it.
talk about
Yeah.
it? Okay. I
And
must
you'll
have
have to
missed
go
that
back
one.
with it. It's the second one.
He talked about it, but you didn't ask Roy about it.
Well, everybody's still real sore about that over in Shakota. Just
No,
so
there's a
everyone
sore
knows.
spot.
Okay, so for the fans that have always wondered, because I've heard this story 50 different times, or 50 different ways, because
Right.
it's like a fish story.
Right.
The fight between Alan Keller and
Right.
Roy Duval, the way it happened. Brad, have you heard it 50 different ways?
Several.
I'm telling you. But most of them all was that Roy Duval won the fight. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So,
I
3 or
don't
4
think
years
so.
ago, I asked Roy, I just asked him, I said, Roy, I hope I'm not stepping out of line here. I really hope I wasn't stepping out of line.
Yeah, right.
I know his hands are still
Oh,
this
he's
big. He's
a
still a
big
specimen
man.
of a man. I just sit there and stared at him.
The curiosity is killing me. I have got to know about you and Alan Keller going fight out. He said, what'd you hear? And I said, I heard that every time that you whipped his ass. And he's like, oh, he said that ain't true. He said he was a college All-American wrestler. He wadded me up like a ball, had me on the floor pinned down before I knew what was going on.
Someone from Shakota came through the museum the other day. What'd they tell you, Jimbo? Because the community still ain't real happy about this deal that happened.
I just
50
brought
years
up
ago.
Alan Keller, or something. He said, "Oh, somebody ought to kill that guy." His blood pressure just went up 60 points.
Yeah.
But I just mentioned his name.
He said,
Well,
he broke Roy's nose? That's what he said.
Yeah.
I think everybody in Shakota's mad, but Roy Duval, he just choked. He couldn't have responded any more favorable and funny and humble. And
No, I was just joking.
Yeah.
Those guys, they don't like anything better than a good
Right.
friendly fight. Those bulldoggers when they get
I was
together.
sure glad to hear Bill and Roy on your podcast the other day.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.
We had the best day that day. We did Bill and Roy that morning, and then we stopped and did Ralphie on the way home.
Oh,
and,
man. Haven't got to listen to that one
I
yet.
just felt good about life for several days after that because you couldn't have picked a handful of just more salt of the earth people.
That's right.
To talk to than that, and there aren't a whole lot of people around
Yeah,
like that anymore.
right.
And holy moly, they were just great to talk to.
Danny Lemons is one of my closest friends in the world, and I was sure glad that you. Now, here's something else, y'all. If you have him on again, though, his boy Cody, a year older than me, he grew up as a Golden Gloves boxer, and he was tough. And I mean, rode bulls and bareback horses, but I mean, nobody messed with Cody Lemons. And you have to ask him about where dads from around this whole region of the country would show up at Copan with their tough kid. And they were going to find out how tough their boy was. And they'd show up at Danny Lemons, and they'd go down to the Copan Roundup Club, and Danny'd say, "Okay, Cody, get in the buck and shoot." And he'd say, "Put your boy in the same buck and shoot, and whoever crawls out wins."
One time, my dad tied me and my cousin's arms together and put us in a horse stall.
Well, I was hoping, I don't want to leave here without throwing a little controversy out here to spice up your ratings and everything, but, Rocker Steiner got in that altercation out in Reno, and I saw the whole thing, and when it was all said and done, everybody had this idea and that idea, and I thought, well, shoot, just put them two kids in a horse stall and lock it up and just let them, go at it and just finish it, kind of get the deal all settled, and we can all go on about our business. And
Right.
Anyway, it didn't happen.
Well, all it did was push Rocker Steiner to superstar status.
Yeah,
I can tell you that's all it did. That
Hey.
kid can ride horses so good, and comes from such great rodeo family. I mean, they were all a little bit outcast in rodeo, and I don't know why, because
You know what? It makes
they're
for
all
great-
world champions.
Makes for great conversation. And I'm not going to share my opinion, good or bad, about him, but I know this. The conversations, because of that kid, are many, and they are passionate.
Right.
And my main goal, what drives me every day, is how can I help create more fans?
Right.
And that boy is creating a lot of fans. Like him or love him.
Right.
He's
Well,
creating
I'm one
fans.
of them because he outrides them all, Jimbo.
He
That's
does
all
that.
I can say. He can ride the hair off a bucking horse, and he likes to have a good time when the rodeo's over too. But he hangs out with the legends of legends. I think Bobby Brown flies him around.
He does. He does. Hooter Brown. Do you know he's in Tanya Tucker's new?
Yeah, I saw it the
Video.
other day. Yeah, I've heard a lot of great stories about Tanya Tucker back around those guys' college
Oh
days.
my goodness! You
She
need
was
to
a big rodeo
You
fan.
need to get her on here.
I'd love to get her on.
All you
here.
gotta do is call Hooter. I'm pretty sure he's still got her number.
Yeah, he was in the video just the other day. Her new one. I was me and Jimbo was talking about that video the other day. I said,
Right.
"Did you see it? It had all the old rodeo guys
Yeah.
in it."
Have you? You haven't had Hooter, have you?
Not yet.
No. Oh, you
we've
gotta
talked to
get
him a
him.
few times. We're
Yeah.
just our scheduling sometimes just
Yeah.
me and Jimbo don't get very far. You're a special guy
Well,
from
yeah.
Pawhuska, so
Well,
you got to be a
Pawhuska-
Duval or
Hey.
a McKee to get us away from the house.
Well, I appreciate y'all coming over here. This helped me out. I'm such a fan of the museum too. I want to encourage everybody that if you like any part of rodeo history, you got to come see the Ben Johnson Museum that Cody's put together. It is such a classic. It's a work of art. The museum itself is laid out. It is beautiful. It is a work of art. And what you've done there, I'm so thankful, because Pawhuska, Jimbo, is a special place for me. Even though I grew up over here at Lenapaw, 45 miles away, every time, and I used to go to roan horse and team rope and the club rope, and we didn't get into all that, but I've spent lots of time at Pawhuska, and every time's a big deal because it's a special place in terms of Western history and Osage history. And I want to come back and talk about Osage history one of these times, because I've got a direct connection to the very early stages of that. But anyway, thank you
Quite
for
the story he told me about it the other day.
sharing your town and for what you've done for the cowboy history, especially right here. The Ben Johnson Museum in Pawhuska is unreal. It's unmatched, and it is one of the greatest assets we have in our culture. So congratulations, Cody. Thank you for it.
Well, wait till you come back and see all I've done to it since you've been there last, Justin.
I can't wait.
It's going to flip you over for a loop. You're not
Lots
gonna
of bed
believe
and
it.
breakfasts, lots of Airbnbs around there too. People can fly into Tulsa and be up there in a snap.
Oh yeah, we've got to mention our new sponsor, Jimbo, the Buck and Flamingo, largest turquoise jewelry store in the state of Oklahoma. My wife runs it. She's the producer of this show, so we have to give her a shout out.
She is a rock star on TV.
Oh,
I've,
yeah.
I've talked to her. I said, you need to come down there and get on the Cowboy Channel with me. She is
She's
so
great. She could do it.
She's
no
so
doubt about it.
entertaining. She
She
is
could-
so funny and likable.
She could be the play-by-play.
You talk about marrying over your head.
Oh, I know. I married over
married
my
Superwoman.
head. I understand this. I know. I ain't no dummy.
Yep.
I ain't no dummy.
Superwoman.
You hit a home run for sure.
Grand Slam.
Yep.
There's only one thing wrong with her. She thinks I hung the moon. I don't know what's wrong with her.
Well, shoot, man, I would run with that.
Justin, thank you for doing this today.
Oh, man.
Appreciate you calling us, letting you know you're going to be here, and
Golly.
we have
an
been
honor.
skating around this for a long
Oh,
time.
yeah.
We called him a year ago or more, and he said, "I don't want to do this over the phone. I don't want to do this on the computer. I want to do this right here."
Right.
I really
With you
wanted to be in
guys.
Pawhuska, but this just was going to be the only way I could.
Well, maybe next time and you can come over and we'll do that Osage story you was talking
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'd like that.
Your daughter, she's making big waves. I just saw.
Yes,
she's following
thank
the
you.
family
Thank
footsteps. She's getting involved with some of the looks like the production and marketing side.
She
of,
is.
of rodeo.
She works for a company called Succeed. It's a digestive enzyme paste, a horse paste, and she's helping with their marketing. She's actually in charge of all the rodeo endorsees. She's their point person, and she's in charge of them and utilizing them on social media. And so she's in the rodeo business, and she was in Vegas. Probably what you saw was her post last week. She was in Vegas for the PRCA Sponsor Summit,
Yeah, I saw
and
it.
she represented her company there. And she's been with them a year, even though she just graduated a few months ago. But it was it's fun to see her mixing and mingling with all the people that we've known through the years, and as a professional, as a somebody that's playing the game right here with us. So I'm proud of her. Thank you.
Yeah, I was like, I know that girl
Yeah, you bet.
for sure. I'm glad to see generational rodeo people continuing it on. No doubt about it. All right.
I appreciate it very much.
Oh, and Justin's wife sells turquoise jewelry too. What's the name of it? J&J Turquoise?
Double J.
Double J Turquoise. If you can't buy it in Pawhuska, get it from them in High Call, right?
There you go.
Thanks, Cody.
All right, Justin. We sure appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank
and
you.
We're going to have to get the Osage one over in Osage County.
I can't wait to come back. One of my favorite people you've had on here has been Rodney Lay. I tell you what,
Oh,
I
isn't he
laughed.
something?
Oh my goodness. By the way, he got on twice too. So yeah, I'd
right.
like to come back.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, we should have picked another one up with Rodney while we were over
Oh,
here.
yeah.
Gosh, that guy's another guy you just feel better about yourself after you're sitting around with him.
isn't
He's just
he
such a great
awesome?
guy.
Yep.
Such
All
a
your
great
guests
guy.
have been. I've enjoyed every podcast.
You know, I didn't ask Arnold Feltz about roping with that toothpick either. Same
That's
with the
true.
fight with
Yeah, that's
Roy
true.
and
Yeah.
Roy and them.
You know, I do go over and rope with Arnold a little bit, a couple times a year. I have gone over. He lives at Dublin, just about 30 minutes west of me, and he's come over to my house a couple times, and I sure enjoy him. And I do rope. I didn't finish my story. When I go to Ellensburg, they have a pro-am team roping, and I always get to rope with a pro as an amateur in their pro-am out there. It's always that's my big roping day of the year.
He can rope in a pro celebrity, either slot.
I know.
The
he's
pro or
right.
the celebrity.
I know. That's true. Hadn't thought of that. That's probably first, isn't it?
Well, Justin, we're sure proud to know you, and thank you for what you've done for the Western way of life.
Well, back at you. I'm just glad I'm your friend, and I've known you since you were 15 years old. And Jimbo and me have been in the same arena, and we've ate some of the same dirt a lot of times, and our families go way back, and it's just an honor to be on here. I'm just thankful for what you guys do. Oh, I got one more thing. Last night during the rodeo, I'm announcing the rodeo, and I had some extra time to fill, and I said, by the way, I'm going to have one of the best days of my life tomorrow because my favorite podcast is going to show up right here at Coffeyville in that building right here, and Jimbo and Cody Garnett from the Cowboys of the Osage are going to bring their stuff here, and I'm going to do the podcast. And when I said Cowboys of the Osage, I mean the whole crowd went to clapping and yelling. That's a true story. Brad was right here judging the rodeo, and he didn't you?
Yeah, I was
They
telling
did.
him about you plugging.
They
That was
did.
Wednesday night. There must have been about 10 people here.
No, I'm telling you, you guys have a big bunch of fans right here. So I was proud for
That's
you.
good to hear. Thank
I was
you.
proud for you.
All right, everybody. We'll see y'all next week.
Later.
Old stories like long lost friends, rodeos and late night bends, history before our time, round pens and pasture rides, cowboys of the Osage.